Alright, shalom to the Israelite community. Alright, Israelites, I just finished watching this video and it's sad after all this time that the Israelites don't do research. They don't know the Tanakh. You know what I'm saying? They don't believe in real history and they reject truth. They reject truth and the Israelites is confused still. And, you would think, how would these Israelites make it to the promised land with false history and believe in false history? They believe in the Jewish community myths. You, they let the Israelites with false history be the beacon of light, to draw you other Israelites in to keep damage done to our heritage. And the Israelites, when they regurgitate the Sephardim and Ashkenazi history, they get promoted, man, and they, be kind of like successful in a sense. You got a lot of big Israelite organizations, and people will say, well, they got to have some truth because they got, a significant following or that they're in a good, prominent place. Well, we got to trust in Tanakh history, and we know that our enemies are real crafty, and their job is to prolong the truth or stop the truth from getting in. So they would let Israelites with false history be the beacon of light. They'll say, well, they claiming the Israelite history, but let's promote the false ones with the false history that leads to our enemies. Let's put them on a pedestal or put them in a prominent position to draw in all the other Israelites. And basically that's what's been going on for a long time. You would think after all this time that the Israelites would have did some research or that they'll have research institutions developed, man, to where that we can, like sort out what's Sephardim history, what's Ashkenazi history, and what's our history. The Israelite Brotherhood been doing that for a long time. That's why I'm able to show you when Israelites are promoting false history that don't belong to us. That's like the Israelites, man, that's in the promised land. Man, they not teaching real Israelite history. And it seemed like that they would have been to set up some institutions that's just dedicated to research, and that they would research, man, the whole Tanakh and try to get an understanding of what happened to us. But they embrace the Sephardi history. They believe in that 10 lost tribe. They believe that all the peoples that didn't go through the curses or that didn't suffer the curses miraculously escaped and was able to keep an Israelite identity after the covenant was broken during the Babylonian Wars. Why don't these Israelites know that we went into Africa during the Babylonian Wars and that, that constitute the majority of us? I showed that the exiles was cut off because the exiles wouldn't have let the Edomites get into our heritage and become dominant and go men up under the false Israelite name, using our name falsely, and that them Israelites that was part of our heritage that come in from the exiles from Babylon would have documented them folks sneaking into our heritage. And man, I just want y'all to listen to this, and then I'm going to show y'all again that it never was any 10 lost tribes. Those Israelites in the promised land, man, they embraced everybody, man. The folks that didn't go through the curses, they embraced them and they let them slide with the Israelite title. Now, I done been to the promised land, and I'm here to tell you that the peoples who claiming to be an Israelite that from Africa and all these other parts, man, they don't share the same heritage or don't have the same persona that we Israelites have that's in captivity, man. And you can just tell that they are not Israelites. And a lot of them Israelites that promote them people as being Israelites, man, you can see that they use false history, so you can't trust nothing that they say because their history is off. So how in the world is they going to be able to show who an Israelite is when they believe in lies and so forth? And I'm here to show you, man, that they teaching lies over there. You know, they don't know that the Edomites come into our heritage in 130 BC, and that it was a lot of Edomite tribes that converted to what they call Judaism that come into Africa. And then that's why those people that's claiming the Israelite heritage in Africa didn't suffer the curses, because they didn't break the covenant. They didn't break the covenant, so they wasn't transported during the transatlantic slave trade to the Americas and all other places and stuff, you know. But you have Israelites, men that's in the promised land, and then they teach that, you know, during the Assyrian times, 10 tribes was taken away, and now everybody is Israelites all over and so forth, and that's false. And then we're gonna have to combat that. We're going to have to shut that down one day, because the truth is going to have to be, you know, what lead us. And I'm here to show you, man, that them Israelites using that false history, man, can't lead us, and they can't be the beacon of light. You know, that's why you know, I done read their history, man, and they made a promise not to let no Israelites from captivity come into their organization. So they the only ones benefiting under the Israelite title, man, promoting falsehood. Man, let's listen, man, to some of this mess. Let's listen to some of this mess, man. It's awful.
Which is the population is much more higher from, right?
They're more, in Israel, there are approximately 500,000 people of African ancestry who live here. You have Ethiopians, you have African American Jews, you have asylum seekers from Sudan and Eritrea, you have Afro-Palestinians, you have Afro-Bedouins, and you have African American Hebrew Israelites as well. So,
So who is the real Israelite? All of them? Or because I'm very confused. I'm trying to understand. When I travel, my followers tell me Israelite, Israelite, Israelite. They know these things.
Yeah.
So who is the Israelite?
The Israelites are people who trace their lineage back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
Okay.
the 12 tribes of Israel.
Okay.
The 12 tribes of Israel were dispersed to different places in the world. And
True.
you say that there are 10 tribes who were dispersed in 721 BC by the Assyrians, and they disappeared, but they never disappeared.
Man, that's false. All right, he gonna try to say that the peoples and all over the world, that that's in Iraq and in Africa, in South America, and all those folks got there during the Assyrian times and so forth, and that, you know, they was able to keep their Israelite heritage and didn't suffer the curses, and then that they just come back to the promised land. Man, that mess is crazy. That, man, is evil.
They have been around in so many places since the dispersion. So you have some in South America, you have some in North America, you have some in South Africa, West Africa, East Africa,
Okay.
North Africa. You have some
I
still
got
in
you.
Iraq, you have some in Iran.
Man, that's evil. That's evil to say during the Assyrian times that the Israelites made it all the way to the Americas. You know, I showed that the Assyrian Empire was destroyed in 612 BCE by Ashkenazi, when Ashkenazi came and settled in our land after running us out during the Babylonian Wars. And then we know that the Israelites was on Egyptian religion, the northern kingdom, and that it wasn't no Egyptian worship or golden calf worship in the Americas and in all these other places. And then I show me that the conversions that the Sephardists that left the promised land in 70 AD had trade routes as Randonites, and wherever they went to all over the world that they converted peoples. You know, they was all in Africa and so forth, and that Israelites be using their history not knowing the truth. It's awful. These are the Randonite trade routes, and that's them. You, you know, some of them gonna have pigmentation, and that they was everywhere. See, all them peoples from all these lands and so forth, are claiming Israelite heritage, and that them folks from the transatlantic slave trade that be using Sephardim history, accept them folks as Israelites, and say that that they left during Assyrian times. But we know that if we read Tanakh history, that that's false. That's false. That's false. And that we wasn't around in 70 AD when her temple was destroyed, and then them Edomites ran across North Africa and went into Portugal and Spain, and then they the ones that started the transatlantic slave trade. They was merchants, Israelites be confused, and then our enemies let them be the beacon of light to the rest of you Israelites, Look at Psalms 83. Keep not thou silence, O Elohim, O Yah, and hold not thy peace, and be not still, O Yah. For lo, thine enemies make a atonement, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. And that's what they did. Listen, and then the Tanakh go on to look, for they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacle of Edom, and the tabernacle of the Ishmaelites of Moab, and the Hagarenes. They go on, the Ammon, the Gabal, the Philistines. All of them are in cahoots, to keep the truth from being showed. And them Israelites that's in the promised land are just a beacon of light for falsehood, because we know that it wasn't no 10 lost tribes. It never was any 10 lost tribes. Let's go to Hezekiah. See, them Israelites don't know a timeline, and then that's why they teach falsehood. But if we go to Hezekiah in 715 BCE, this is like 5 years after the so-called Assyrian captivity, where they say that 10 tribes were taken. But let's read and see what it say. So we showing this is false, what that brother said. You know what I'm saying? Look, Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah. So everybody was still in the land. But let them teach you that everybody was taken away. 10 tribes were snatched up and dispersed all around the world. But that's not so when the Assyrians were still around and was defeated in 612 BCE, almost 100 years later, after, we was at home under Hezekiah rule. Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah, and he also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh to come to the house of the Elohim in Jerusalem to keep the Passover. For the Elohim Yah of Israel, the king and his officers and the congregation in Jerusalem had agreed to keep the Passover in the 2nd month. For at that time they were unable to keep it, for not enough priests had sanctified themselves, nor had the people assembled in Jerusalem. The king and the whole congregation thought it proper to issue a decree and proclaim throughout all Israel. Look, and proclaim throughout all Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, Now let's look up again where Beersheba to Dan is. Now, and then this is after the so-called 722 BCE. Man, this is like 5 years later. This is 5 years later. The Assyrians had not taken everybody. Listen, and Hezekiah sent a letter, look, from Beersheba all the way to Dan. All the way to Dan. Man, that's our heritage. Everybody was still in the land. Watch this. So those Israelites, men, are teaching falsehood, and they're used as a beacon of light to draw the rest of you Israelites in. Man, our enemies is not going to let the truth come in that easy. They not going to let the truth come in that easy, because then they know that they got to stand down and that they got to do right. And then prophecy will come in. When the truth come in, prophecy will start to be fulfilled. Prophecy will start to be fulfilled. That's why we still in captivity, because Almighty Yah hadn't brung us home. He hadn't brung us home yet, but our enemy are slick, and they'll let the Israelites with false history be the beacon of light to the rest of you Israelites. But look here. All right. Throughout all Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, that they come and keep the Passover for the Elohim Yah of Israel in Jerusalem. Not often did they act in accord with what was written. The courtiers went out with the letters from the king and his officers throughout all Israel. Look, throughout all Israel and Judah. So how could everybody be gone? By order of the king, proclaiming, O you Israelites, return to the Elohim Yah of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and he will return to the remainder of you who are escaped from the hands of the kings of Assyria. Do not be like your fathers and brothers who trespassed against the Elohim Yah, their fathers, and return them into a horror, as you see, because some of them was taken, and I'm going to show you the ones taken: Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, the fighters. See, the real Israelite history ain't been told, man, until you listen to the Israelite Brotherhood. Our enemies is not finna promote this truth. This truth barely get the light. You know what I'm saying? This truth barely get the platform. Because they know what I'm saying is true. And come to the sanctuary which consecrated forever, and serve the Elohim Yah, so that his anger may turn back from you. If you return to the Elohim, your brothers and children will be regarded with compassion by the captives and will return to this land. For the Elohim Yah is gracious and merciful. He would not turn his face from you if you return to him. As the courtiers passed from town to town in the land of Ephraim and Manasseh till they reached Zebulun, they were laughed at and mocked. And some of the peoples of Asher and Manasseh and Zebulun, however they came. But as you read, men, the Israelites, men are still there. The Israelites are still there. And then when you go to King Hezekiah's great-grandson, man, is going to be King Josiah. This is in 640 BCE. So how could he be any 10 lost tribes? How could it be any 10 lost tribes when King Josiah had everybody men at home? Let's read some of his history. Josiah was 8 years old. This is in 640 BCE. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. And he did what was pleasing to the Elohim, following the ways of his father David, without deviating to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the Yah of his father David. And in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the shrines, the scared posts, and the idols and the molten images. At his bidding, they demolished the altars of Baal. He had the incense stands above them cut down. He smashed the scared posts, the idols, and the images, ground them into dust, and stowed it onto the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. He burnt the bones of the priests of their altars and purged Judah and Jerusalem and in the towns of Manasseh and Ephraim and Simon, as far as Naphtali. Listen, so he went as far as Naphtali and meant to clean the land up as it was prophesied he would do. Look. So from Simon all the way, man, to Naphtali. So, the Israelites was at home. Why would King Josiah, who Prophet Jeremiah was around doing his reign, why would he be telling a lie? This is after the so-called Assyrian captivity. When King Josiah come on, we was dealing with Babylon then, because the Egyptians tried to come across the land to help the Assyrians after King Josiah had cleaned the land up of the Egyptian worship and the Amorite Babylonian worship. So the Assyrians wasn't the problems no more. We was dealing with Babylon during King Josiah's time because the Egyptians killed him to go aid the Assyrians, who was being destroyed by the Chaldeans or Ashkenazi. So them Israelites don't have real history that's teaching in the promised land. Look, he burnt the bones of the priests of their altars and purged Judah and Jerusalem in the town of Manasseh, Ephraim, Simon, as far as Naphtali, lying in ruins on every side. He demolished the altars and the scared posts and smashed the idols and ground them into dust. And he hewed down all the incense stands throughout the land of Israel. Look, throughout the land of Israel. Then he returned to Jerusalem, and in the 8th year of his reign, while he purged the land of the house, look, he was still there. Look, and we know that he just cleaned up the land from Simon to Naphtali, as it said. That's King Josiah. That's King Josiah, a king that come by prophecy. Man, the Israelites' history be off. And then look here. After the exiles were destroyed, the Edomites took over. So in 70 AD, the Edomites was in the Israelite heritage fully and officially. What Israelites would have accepted that? What Israelites wouldn't have complained about that and wrote about that? But if you listen to them Israelites with false history that's used as a beacon of light to draw you other Israelites in, then, you'll believe that mess. Look here, in 130 BCE, John Harnicus, the Edomite, also initiated a military campaign against the Edomites. During the campaign, Harnicus conquered, the majority of the Edomite towns, and Harnicus then instituted forced conversion on the Edomites to Judaism. Them are the ones that went into Africa after leaving the promised land, after Ashkenazi kindred had their temple destroyed, Edom's temple destroyed, that he built in 20 BC. He took the ones down that Zerubbabel and them repaired on that Solomon had built. He took it down to the ground and then had building construction stuff, and it was in building all the way up to 70 AD till it was destroyed. Man, the Zealots and the Edomites protected that temple and fought against the Romans. Now, them Israelites and Demonists say that the Israelite community went into Africa in 70 AD. And then that's false, because Edom was in our heritage. Edom was in our heritage since 130 BCE, when John Harnicus come on. You know what I'm saying? He forced converted them. So then they would have been seen as Israelites 40, 50 years ago. They was mixed in with all the other folks and stuff, and that they had heard Edomite temple. But you can't tell them Israelites that that use false history and then be used as a beacon of light to the rest of the Israelite community. Listen to him.
Then in 70 AD, we were dispersed from here.
Uh-huh.
We settled in North Africa for a short period of time until the conquest of the Arabs. And we had to move from that area because they were forcibly trying to Arabize us and to convert us from Israelites into either Arabs or
Islam,
Muslims.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And so we migrated to West Africa. We were in
See, he got his history messed up because in 600 and 600 and 600 AD is when Islam was created. Now, he said in 70 AD that, Islam came at the folks and it wasn't even around. Men, them Israelites do not have correct history and they're used as a beacon of light, meant to draw you Israelites in. That's why they're let to come home, and then that's why the enemy stuck them in Dimona by the nuclear plants and stuff, hoping that they'll be protected, and then which it'll protect the nuclear plants that, them folks have there. But man, them folks' history is all the way off, and then they're used as a beacon of light. A beacon of light. It never was any 10 lost tribes. And in 70 AD, man, the Edomites had the promised land on lock. You know what I'm saying? Look, the zealots. Look, the zealots called the zealots coup in Jerusalem. Man, they was fighting with Ashkenazi in the proxy war because Ashkenazi had the synagogues, and that's written throughout the New Testament where Jesus went to them synagogues. He was an Edomite, and then he tried to get them to convert to their way, that they had the temple. The Edomites had the temple. See, the Edomites had the temple. Following their victory, the Zealots and Edomites established tribunals, and killed their opponents, including, all them folks. But the Edomites, man, was in control of the land. Man, the Zealots and the Edomites established tribunals, and this is in 67 to 68, and then 2 years later, Ashkenazi kinfolks, the Romans came and burnt that Edomite temple down, and that wasn't the temple that we Israelites built during Solomon time. And that, them Israelites, men here are using false history. Men, they using false history.
Africa until the Portuguese came in 1448, and they began what was called the transatlantic slave trade.
See, look, those were the Edomites that went across North Africa in 70 AD, and that'll be these folks right here. These folks right here. Them right there, and them right there, and that they settled in Portugal, and they was up under the Israelite title, doing Judaism, and then if they come down, men enslaved the folks, and it's documented. It's documented throughout this book right here. You see what I'm saying? And this book show that Ashkenazi come up on the scene later, and that Aaron Lopez and all of them was Sephardim. You see what I'm saying? So them Israelites, man, in the promised land, man, because they there, you can't believe what they say because they're used as a beacon of light. Listen, they don't know this right here. They don't know in the book of Jeremiah. They don't know in the book of Jeremiah that we abandon our heritage, just like Tanakh say. They think that we went into Africa as Israelites, and that we was up under the covenant up off the land, and for some mysterious reasons we got enslaved and brought to America, and then was stripped, of our heritage. That's false. We had abandoned our heritage long time ago. Look, throughout your borders. I will make you your rampant as heap in the field. This is Jeremiah 17. You will forfeit, listen, you will forfeit by your own act the inheritance I have given you. I will make you a slave to your enemies in a land you have never known. And that's going to be the Americas. There were no Israelites over here, man, until we got over here doing the transatlantic slave trade. But we had been abandoned our heritage. And then you can see that right here. Look. In the book of Jeremiah is when we broke the covenant. In chapter 44. When we told him after we were chased out by Ashkenazi under the name Scythian, who controlled the Chaldean army, that we told them this. Thereupon they answered Jeremiah, all the men who knew that their wives made offerings to other gods, and all the women present, a large gathering, and all the people who lived in Petros in the land of Egypt. We will not listen to you in the matter about which you spake to us in the name of the Elohim. On the contrary, we will do everything that we have vowed, to make offerings to the Queen of Heaven and to pour out libations to her, as we used to do, we and our fathers, our kings, and our officials in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty to eat, we were well off and suffered no misfortune. But since we stopped making offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pouring out libations to her, we have lacked everything, and we have been consumed by the sword and by famine. And when we make offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pour out libations to her, is it without our husbands' approval that we have made cakes in her likeness and poured libations to her? See, that's when we broke covenant, and that's what caused us to get driven off the land. It's not the history that the peoples in Demona is showing. It's not the camps on the street corners, the ones in purple, who believe in the same history that we went into Africa in 70 AD, and they disregard the Edomites controlling the land. All of them are used as a beacon of light to draw you Israelites in and to keep you fooled and misguided from truth. You know, truth is going to be our strength. You know, that's why come we not at home as a people, because we don't have truth. The majority of us don't have truth, and we doing the Jewish community history. They are not the Israelite Brotherhood and the Israelites that, you know, study with me. You know, I just wanted to show that, man, after listening to that brother teach them lies, and then they promote that. That's why they there, because they letting them be a beacon of light to the rest of the Israelite community. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood.